All right, let's talk about Astrographia. Here's a company that seems to have completely flipped a basic rule of business on its head. I mean, how do you make more money when your sales are actually going down? It's a super interesting story, and it tells us a lot about what it takes to survive and thrive today. So let's get right to the heart of it, the thing that makes this whole story so fascinating. It really all comes down to one big question. Yeah, how can profits just soar when your revenue is actually dipping? It doesn't sound right, does it? It goes against everything we think we know about business. So let's dig in and figure out what's going on here. Okay, so check out these numbers. This is where it gets wild. In 2024, Astrographia's revenue, it actually went down by 5%. But get this, their net profit shot up by a massive 45%. I mean, 45%. That's the paradox we're talking about, right there in black and white. So, how in the world did they pull this off? Well, to get it, we've got to go back a bit. We need to look at who Astrographia was before all this. For the longest time, Astrographia was all about physical stuff. Since way back in '76, if you needed a photocopier or a printer for your office, they were your guys. But you can see right here on the timeline, things started to shift. Around 2004, they dipped their toes into IT services, then later spun off a whole new division. The seeds for a huge change were being planted. And they had to, right? Because the world was changing and fast. I love this quote from their 2018 report. It shows they weren't burying their heads in the sand. They saw the less paper world coming. They knew it wasn't just some fad. It was a direct threat to their entire business. It was pretty clear, change or get left behind. And that brings us to the big pivot. This is the moment they decided to stop being just a hardware company. Instead, they dove headfirst into selling high-value digital services, the stuff that modern companies were crying out for. And a huge piece of that puzzle was something called Business Process Services, or BPS. It's a simple but brilliant idea. Think about it. Instead of just selling you the scanner, they started selling the whole process. They take all your physical paper, digitize it, and manage the entire digital workflow for you. It's a total game changer. And look at this. This is proof that it worked. Their regular business solutions, a respectable 7% growth. Not bad. But the BPS part of the business, it just exploded. A 74% jump. That's where the profit was. This new, high-margin service was more than covering the dip from selling fewer old-school machines. And this wasn't just a lucky break. It was a seriously smart, calculated bet. They saw a huge wave coming. Experts were predicting that IT services would boom, especially with everyone shifting to remote and hybrid work after the pandemic. Astrographia basically got their surfboard ready and positioned themselves perfectly to ride that wave. Okay, so having a great strategy is one thing, but actually making it happen, that's a whole different ballgame. So how do they do it? Let's pop the hood and see. It really came down to 3 key pillars. It was all about their people, their money, and their leadership. Pretty simple, right? But getting all 3 right is what made this whole transformation actually work. First up, people. I mean, you can't sell 21st century digital solutions if your team is stuck in the 20th century, right? So Astrographia invested a ton in training their employees. They taught them things like design thinking and system analysis, all the skills they needed to actually deliver on this new digital promise. Next, their finances. And honestly, this part is just incredible. They pulled off this massive company-wide shift with 0 bank debt. Nothing. They funded the whole thing themselves. That kind of financial discipline gave them so much freedom and stability to make the right moves, not just the desperate ones. And the third piece of the puzzle, stable leadership. Look, they're mostly owned by a huge established company, PT Astra International. That's a massive advantage. It's like having a super solid foundation to build on. They weren't some chaotic startup just trying anything to see what would stick. This was a calculated, long-term plan with serious backing. All right, so they've pulled off this amazing pivot. It's clearly working. So what's next? Where does a company go after it's already completely reinvented itself? Well, if you listen to their leadership, they're feeling pretty confident. They're basically saying, look, what we've built here isn't just a quick fix. This is our foundation for the future, for real, sustainable growth. And it's really interesting, that growth they're talking about isn't just about money. They're going all in on ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance stuff. And it's not just talk. They've already won a big award for being transparent about their environmental impact. So for them, the future is about growing the right way. So when you look at Astrographia's story, Going from an old-school photocopier company to a digital powerhouse, it really makes you think. In a world that's changing this fast, is reinventing yourself the only real way to grow? It leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? Maybe the biggest risk of all is doing nothing.